And a good day to you, Explorer Nation. John Lynskey, Ambassador of Alumni Affairs, here with Looking Back with Lynskey, Season 5, Episode 4. And we're going in a different direction today, a little bit different than what we've been doing lately. Special guest today in his 32nd year at Columbus High School, Assistant Principal, Dean of Curriculum, Professional Development, whatever you want to call it. He wears many hats. Been in the administration for 15 years now, a decade and a half. He's a Hall of Famer, the proud alumni dad of 2 graduates. He's taught everything there is to teach in the foreign language department in Spanish, just about. And a man who I've been looking forward to this one. So if you would, Explorer Nation, please welcome the one and only Mr. Pedro Garcia-Casals. Pedro, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, John. It's great. Honestly, anytime that I get a chance to talk to you, it's always a pleasure.
I couldn't agree more. Pete. So here we are. And before we get into how you got to Columbus, because everybody's had a different journey, how's the school year been going thus far, would you say?
Well, I would have to say this year, as opposed to more recent years, is going very well from a personal perspective. Up to last year, I was teaching, doing several things. And, we are in the midst of our reaccreditation process, which is always a little hectic, you might say. But I have to say that several people, especially young people, Andres Fernandez, Omar Delgado, Josh Cantor, they stepped it up. And, I was almost shocked when they came in and said, you know what, we'd like to work on this. Andy Chacon, another one. We want to work on this. And I said, wow, I've never had this, that people would actually come out and say, I want to work on this. And I said, great. So this, I have to say, has made my life a little easier. Also, last year was the last year that I taught AP Spanish literature. I've been teaching it for God knows how many years already. To imagine, John, that Juan Villa was my student when I first taught the class. Can you imagine that? That's how far we can go. Okay, so, but I said, you know what? The conditions are right. We have a new teacher, Mrs. Medico. She had the experience of teaching the class, and I tend to read the signs, and with the accreditation, with her coming on board, and I said, you know what, it's time. It's time for me to give it up. So that was something that also eased up the situation, and I find that I'm being able to do things, in a much more comfortable manner. And so that's very good. So I'm in a good place. As far as the school goes, we're just busting. We are just like, I hope we can just, I know that we can continue to ride the wave. We're just in a very good place. And so it's very exciting to be here at this time, so, but we can get in on some of those things later.
Yes, we can. Pete, to prove your point of how long people have been there and everything else, when you're calling Omar and Andy Chacon the young guys, come on now. So they'll be happy to hear that.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. The other side of that coin is, what does that make us if they're the young guys? But be that as it may. So, Pedro, as we mentioned a moment ago, everybody took a different journey to get to Columbus High School. So let's journey back to the 1970s, if you would. You went to Coral Park, the great class of 1976. One of your classmates, the legendary Paul DiBernardo, the ghost of Westchester, and a little bit older than you, the attendance queen herself, Anna Fernandez. So 3 very important Coral Park graduates at Columbus High School. So talk about what it was like living in Westchester, or going to school in Westchester at that time. And after you graduate Coral Park, you started your journey two that will eventually end up at Columbus. So take us through that, Pete.
Okay. Well, let's see. I started. Yes, we lived here in the Westchester area, and even though I think you referred to where you were living at Perrine, which is now something else.
Palmetto Bay, yeah.
Yeah. But here, Westchester, it became an interesting place in some regards. It was an enclave for a lot of the Cubans who were moving westward, you might say, from the little Havana area, and as they became a little more comfortable. This was a neighborhood that was mostly middle class, and but comfortable middle class. There was a large Jewish community here. You remember the big whale that's still there on 87-16. That was their temple. So I had many friends when I went to Coral Park with Jewish. The top of the class usually were the Jewish students who did very, very well, very smart kids. And then there was the larger contingency was Hispanics, mostly Cuban. So that was really the population there. And I would say my high school years were good. I really enjoyed those years. And I still see a few people from that time period. It isn't the same thing, obviously, as what we have here in Columbus or what I've seen for my boys, for example, and how they keep track. And over the years, people like yourself, Dr. Greer, Ralph Peña, when they've come back and they talk about still their friends, are those people that they met here at Columbus. And that experience wasn't the same for me, obviously, but they were good. And I do have to say that it may now in hindsight, it may be serendipity, but I think it was during the summer of my sophomore to junior year that there were these youth corps. I don't know if you remember those during the 70s. And so they offered, jobs for students so that they wouldn't be engaged in, as you call them, shenanigans and that sort of thing. So I went with my cousin, and they were working out of St. John Bosco. So we went there, and they told us, there's a place close by your house in Westchester that where you guys live. They're looking for a couple of guys, as a matter of fact, do some work. And lo and behold, it was Columbus. Now, mind you, we lived in Westchester, and I would drive by Columbus, but it never was in my radar. It was honestly, for us, it was not something we could do. It wasn't something that my parents could afford at the time, as much as they probably would have wanted me to go to a private school. And so we ended up going to Coral Park, and most of my cousins went to Coral Park and so forth. So it was a natural thing. But anyways, so we show up, and Dick Pollock was the one who met us.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I remember and he made an impression, obviously. And so he says, "Oh, cool." So he was very nice about it. And he said, "Well, you're going to work with this gentleman." So he assigned us to, I think his name was Herb Brennan, but I'm not even sure right now. And he was in charge of the maintenance. So we worked with him. And so we actually were detailed to work out in the fields, picking out grass, weeds. One thing we liked the most was mowing the lawn. We would, my cousin and I would fight about who would get on the tractor to drive that lawnmower or across those fields. The walls didn't exist then. It was just like one long field. Running back. And the first experience that I had with the brothers was with Brother Robert. And I don't know if you remember, he was in maintenance, but he was a guy that I had seen before riding his tricycle around Westchester.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? That's Brother Robert.
I had forgotten about that. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So I had seen him because, you go to the Publix and whatever, and he would be around riding his tricycle. I said, "Wow, look at that," And I didn't know that he was a brother. I just thought he lived in the neighborhood. Well, he would call us over from time to time, and meet us by the kitchen door, the brother's house, and he said, "Come." and he would give us some refreshments, and that was my first experience of the brothers.
Yeah.
And it's funny how things happen that later on, when I started working at Columbus, and we went up to sharing our call.
Yeah.
And you've been sharing a call when you go up to a Sopus. One of the activities is to go and visit the grave of a brother that you perhaps knew and so forth. Well, the only brother that I knew who had died was Brother Robert. Then everybody was still very much alive here at Columbus. So, but I said, you know what? I'm going to visit the grave of his brother. So I went and visited and reminisced about those times, that I worked here at Columbus. So and that was my first job ever where I got paid, was at Columbus. Imagine that,
Go figure.
So, yeah, go figure about that. So it's been a while, but then I graduated Core Park, and then I started my journey. I thought initially I would go into medicine, so I went to UM. I had work study, partial scholarship, and so forth, and I started there. And I think it was because my dad wanted to be a doctor in Cuba, and he actually was in med school. And because of the whole revolution thing, he had to leave, and he left that hanging. It was almost like me living through, what my dad would have wanted to do. And but I'm not a science guy. I'm not. And so I tried it, and I was doing okay, but I wasn't really liking it. I even had a job at the VA hospital. And I said, let me try this out. So, they had the work study. So they told me, you want to work at the library? You want the VA hospital? So I'll take the VA hospital. I get, to learn something. So that's where I started. And I found that I really didn't like it, that much, the whole thing. And so I said, there's no sense in me getting loans here, being at UM.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I transferred out. I went
Okay.
to Miami-Dade, changed altogether. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to try something else. I had done some courses at Core Park in architectural drawing, and I always liked that. I always liked drawing and buildings and that sort of thing. So I tried it out, and I started that at Miami-Dade. After a while, and I even got a job doing drafting and so forth. So not for me either. By then, I was finished Miami-Dade. I went to FIU, started something totally new. I said, you know what, I'm going to go with my gut. It's not the practical thing, but I'm going to do philosophy and Spanish literature. I said, that's what I really like. So that's where I got started with that. And I found my niche. And I said, this is really what I like to do. And so after that, I met my wife. Actually, we knew each other from Coral Park. Not really, but we graduated the same year and so forth. So we met up again in at FIU. And we had a youth group over in St. Agatha. We met people that I knew from before and at FIU, and we used to go out. Eventually, we got married, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a jump. I'm going to go for it. So people thought we were crazy. We were settled in already, a year of being married. I said, we're going off to graduate school. I got to do this. I got to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
So I ended up, putting everything in a U-Haul and hitching our car in the back, and people saw us off, and Lourdes, my wife, she didn't understand too much. I said, I just got to do this. It's something. And so we both went to graduate school. Took us 2 days to get to Chapel Hill. That's where I ended up. And so I got there at midnight. Chapel Hill, and I had a friend, one who had come down from Princeton, and another one who was there at Chapel Hill, and they helped me to unload the sofa bed. And so that's where we slept last night in the apartment. So the next morning we get up, and it was in the outskirts of Chapel Hill. Carborough's a little town right next to Chapel Hill. And so we walk out after coffee, and there's a cow pasture across the road. It's a highway.
Perfect.
And my wife says, I'm not going to use an expletive, but she said, "Where did you bring me?
Yeah.
And what are we doing here?" And I said, no, it's going to be fine. Don't worry. so that's how we started. We went to graduate school, and I can tell you it's those years, and we both, say have been probably one of the best years of our life. We had great friends there, great community of people. While we were there also, we were able to go and do a study abroad in Seville, the University of North Carolina. They had an arrangement with the University of Seville. So my wife requested that program. By then, I had a transfer to Duke University, where the idea was to teach at the college level. I was going for a PhD and so forth.
Okay.
And I was going to be a professor and do literature and so forth. So she asked for this, and we went to Spain. We were there for a year. That was an awesome year. Really enjoyed it. Traveled some, and then came back. And we were trying to start a family by that time, and we had to settle that. And we were having some difficulties, as as it goes.
As it goes, yeah.
I said, you know what? We sat down, we talked about it for a long while, and we tried a few things, and it seemed like adoption was going to be the way to go for us. And I thought, I was on the process of writing my dissertation, and I said, if I pursue this, we're going into academics, and that can be a gruesome, journey, in the sense that you have to be producing, writing your dissertation, and getting published, and it's a grind. And in the meantime, we had to settle a few things, personal things. And so, when people ask me, why did you not finish your PhD? I said, well, life happens, and so we had to make a decision. And rather than going the route of, trying to get a job at some place, maybe a little town in Iowa, and starting there, I didn't see us doing that. We decided to come out to Miami. So that was crazy, in a way. But and then the same person who had, when we first got to Chapel Hill, who told me, "Where did you bring me?" Didn't want to come back. And I remember I was saying goodbye to people at Duke, going through the different offices, and she was with me, and she would say, no, we can't go, and I said, listen, everything is already in Miami. We had just flown up to just take the car back and everything. We're doing this, and we're doing this for this reason. And she said, but we can't, it's not right, it doesn't feel right. I said, step in here. So we went into the classroom and said, let's have a conversation. Let's talk this out, because it's a go already, but I guess anything could happen. We could still change and come back. No, it doesn't feel right. So I thought it was odd that it was the same person who had, asked me about this initially. Now she didn't want to come back to Miami.
Funny how that happens.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So we did. And I'm getting around to I can be a bit of a talker sometimes, even though I am kind of reserved. But anyway, so I'm coming back to how I started at Columbus. So we come back. She got a job at Carleton, and I started working at Norland Middle School.
Really, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Norland Middle, huh?
Yes,
Okay.
Miami Gardens. Gardens.
Yes.
Okay, so that was an experience, John. It was. I mean, I have stories from those years, but from that year, because it was that. But bottom line is, it was around October, November, and I was very frustrated. And I said to my wife, "Listen, if this is what teaching is about, I'm going to find a different line of job, because I just can't do this. This is not what I thought of doing." I went from wanting to be a professor at the college, university level, to teaching middle schoolers. It was
middle school is hell.
It is. Yeah.
Come on
that probably is the worst of all grade levels to teach. It's when the hormones are just flaring, and there's a lot of things going on, and kids don't even know. You talk about sophomores being difficult.
No.
It takes a special kind of person. I said, this is not me. You know what?
Yeah.
So my wife, by then, she had a good relationship where she had the friendship of Concy Panzer. They had broke it up, and they actually had a good friendship going. And Concy said to my wife, says, why doesn't Pedro just go and apply at Columbus. You know, my husband worked there, and he likes it. I think he would be the right fit for Columbus. And so she came home and told me about it. I said, yeah, yeah, okay, so I'll apply. So I did. And Concy had arranged it, you know, so that Fred, I didn't know Fred, I didn't know Concy.
Okay.
But she said, I'll ask Fred to put in a good word for you without, he didn't know anything about me. He just went on Concy's word through what she knew of Lourdes. Anyways, so I get in here and I met up with Brother Kevin, who was the principal then.
Yeah.
And Brother Kevin's looking at me and he says, let me ask you, how did you know that we were looking for a Spanish teacher? I said, well, brother, no, I didn't know that you were looking for a Spanish teacher. I just decided to apply. He says, yeah, we need a Spanish teacher. And we need you to start right now. And I said, well, brother, I have a contract with the public schools, and if a situation where that I was working here, you would not want me to leave you hanging halfway through the year. I had the kids, and I thought if you hold the job for me till August, I'll come back. And this was to replace Doc Guerra.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So they said, okay, we'll work it out. So they worked it out that semester. Somehow, I don't even know how they worked it out.
You don't want to know. Yeah.
I don't want to know. I mean, I heard stories later, but I don't want to know that. So then he said, okay, fine. So you got the job, and so I finished the year, and then later on I met up with Concy and Fred. I finally met Fred, and I wanted to thank them. And they were telling me the story, of how it happened, because Concy told Fred, this guy he's the husband of, this person who works with me, and he's going to go in for an interview. And his name is Juan Casals. And that's because they knew my wife as Lourdes Garcia-Casals. They knew as Casals.
Oh,
so
boy.
Juan Casals. So when Fred went up to Kevin, he says, listen, I want to put in a good word for this guy, Juan Casals. He said, who?
Yeah.
And so I don't know any Juan Casals. Yeah, the guy who interviews us. Spanish. No, I interviewed a Pedro Garcia. I don't know who Juan Casals is.
Oh, geez.
So we got a kick out of that. But
geez.
anyways, that's how I started here. And to this day, I appreciate tremendously. First of all, brother, for trusting me and giving me the opportunity, holding the job.
Yes.
Till September.
Yeah.
But Concy and Fred, because I didn't know it then, John, but it's what I've come to experience here at Columbus. And I probably could even trace it back to that first encounter that I had with Brother Robert. It's that hospitality, that trust, without, anything else, nothing expected back. And so it's that generosity. And it's been like that since I started here. And these were two people who didn't know me, took a chance and, put in a good word. And so here I am. And the rest is, it's history, John. So
it's been a long and winding road. And you mentioned something a moment ago, it reminded me of one of your favorites, John Lennon, when you said life is what happens basically when you're busy making other plans. So from perhaps being a college professor, you end up back in Westchester. And how long did it take you to adjust to the students at Columbus, Pete? Because it was a little bit different 30 some odd.
It was. I got to tell you, and I again, I didn't know much about Columbus, to be honest with you, even though I was from Westchester. I mean, it wasn't in my radar. The only person that I remember associated with Columbus was Destrade, who used to play baseball.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was the only guy. And so that was the only connection. But other than that, I didn't know anybody else. So it was new. But my perception of Columbus was that it was this prep school, much like the same opinion that we have perhaps of the other prep school over in Sweetwater.
Yeah, that place.
It just seemed like somehow, an upper echelon kind of thing. And yet I started here And when you come in, you start at the bottom. You start the teaching the classes that nobody wants to teach. You get the hot potato stuff.
Yeah,
And
pretty much.
so I started. Yeah, you know how it is. Uh, and so I started teaching the classes, and it was 91. It wasn't the 80s, but it was just the end of that period, as you might imagine.
Yeah,
And there were some rough guys, yes, some shenanigans, as you call them, going on, and
some
so it was a little
buffoonery.
difficult. Yeah, I came in and I said, you know what, I had picked up a few things from middle school, and so I decided that I was going to address the young men, and mind you, I was 33, but I would address them as Mr. So and so, and I have to say that just drove them crazy. They didn't want me to be, and they told me halfway through, "Sir, can you stop calling us by our last name?" Uh, and so this was after December, that's a Christmas, and you're not supposed to smile and everything before.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
It got relaxed.
yeah.
But what I saw was that I didn't expect to have some of the students that I had, and I was wondering why did they allow these students to come into Columbus? This is not like their place there. I had these ideas of what Columbus was supposed to be,
Yeah, I
and
get that.
I, I have to say, after 2 years, and I saw them because I had them maybe a sophomore year, and I saw some of the same guys in junior year, and I started to appreciate that something happens in that summer. I don't know what. Something happens usually between the summer, between sophomore and junior year. They seem to like grow. I mean, they just come in like a totally different person.
Yeah,
Some of the same guys, and I saw them graduate, and I began to appreciate what we do here for these guys and how we make a difference. And it was the same guys that were rambunctious, and now they were like gentlemen. And I said, you know what? I prejudged the situation, and I said I was wrong. I was wrong about it, and I started to realize then what it meant for them and their experience here as they were going as students, and what we were doing as a school, and I really began to appreciate what it all means. And I think we've talked about it many times. We continue to talk about it, and we continue to do the best we can. And I hear it in the podcast when you have people coming back, and I can relate. I can immediately understand what we're talking about. So that was the first few years. I was teaching Spanish, and I really enjoyed it. I liked the energy. I felt right at home. I have to say, I think Consley was right. I mean, it was the right fit. Uh, Culturally, for me, it's been important also because it was Westchester.
yeah,
The guys that I teaching Spanish, obviously, that played into it, and but I really enjoyed it. And Mrs. Watson, you remember Mrs. Watson?
Oh, Yolanda, we started the same year. Yes,
Oh, you
yes.
did. Oh, you
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
she took me under her wing. Fred Panzer used to call her the mama hen, and and she protects, and so we would sit on the ledge. I was teaching in C12, and she taught in C13, and Amelia in C11. So I had them
Yeah,
flanked.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was flanked by the two ladies. But Yolanda would, in the afternoons, kids would stop by, and we'd be talking and so forth. And she would come in. She says, "Mr. Garcia-Casals, oh, get all those flies off of you. Come out here and let's talk." So we would sit on the ledge, and great
Uh,
woman. I loved her
that's
because
awesome.
she really tried to help me. And she said, "Mr. Garcia-Casals, I want to tell you a few things. Up in the teachers' lounge, you're gonna look at everything. You want to sit where the coaches sit because you're a man. You need to sit there. There's a lot of things going on here, but you want to sit there because that's where you want to be." So she gave me all these pointers, and I remember, I appreciated that, and brother Julio also.
Oh, Julio. God bless Julio.
Julio, I mean, these are people who took me in. Kathy Canella. She was fabulous. Kathy Canella was great. I love her. I mean, she
Yeah,
was just like fantastic. She and Sal, and And then with Julio, I remember in the afternoons I would go and visit him when we had the bookstore over where Carlos Moro is now in
Yeah,
C14.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I enjoyed going over to visit with brother. And what I liked was to hear the stories. And this was my initiation, I guess, into the Columbus mindset, spirit, charism, psych, whatever you want to call it. And I always credit Julio uh, for being that model initially for me. And I remember I enjoyed talking to him, and you know how he would get all feisty and upset about, if only whatever, and he would
That,
go
that,
about.
that was very good imitation. Yes.
Yeah, well, I saw him so many times, and I would laugh. But then he would crack a smile, and then he would have a twinkle in the eye. You knew that he wasn't serious, you know. But you know what I saw with brother was that the passion that I have seen with many of the brothers, and he was a missionary brother.
Hmm.
Obviously, he was Spaniard. He got his training, and he got his training in Italy and so forth. And these were all great stories. He was a good storyteller too. And so when he finished, he wanted to do missionary work, and missionary for them was coming to the Americas. And so he ended
Yeah,
up in Cuba.
yeah,
And I'd say every time that he spoke about those years in Cuba, he would get all emotional, and he would even get teary eyed, and just talking about the experiences that he had and how much he loved it. And then later in Japan, and you begin to see the passion, of from him, and I've gone to see it later on for the brothers that I've known. The idea that these men would give up their lives for a passion for something that they really believed in terms of teaching and being mentoring and serving and teaching young men, and the way that they do it with the spirit that they do it, it's just like I started appreciating all that, and years later when Marcelin was canonized, my father-in-law uh, studied with the Maris in Cuba, and before going off to the Institute, which is the equivalent of high school. And he always swore that was my only connection with the Maris. I knew from Cuba. My father talked about them, but my father-in-law studied with the Maris in the province in the interior of the island. And he always said, and he's 92 right now, still alive and so forth, but he has been a very successful entrepreneur and businessman. And he always said that everything he learned about accounting and other things of life, he learned from the brothers. And he had the highest respect for the brothers. When there was canonization of Champagne, they had a mass in the St. Mary's Cathedral, and I wasn't able to go, but he went with my father-in-law, and they both went. And they recounted later how when the brothers processed in, all dressed up,
yeah,
he lost it.
yeah. I get that. I get that. So, Pete, what you're talking about is what we discuss all the time. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. And now, of
Yeah.
course, for our new teachers, they don't realize, they don't know what they don't know. There was
Right.
no Apollo program that Terry's done such a good job with and passed it on. We learned by doing. They threw you in the deep end of the pool, and either you swam or you sank, but there were always those people that kept you afloat, as you
Yeah.
just pointed out. And so we find ways to evolve. But those days, I mean, if you made it, you earned it. No
You're,
question about that.
you're right. You're right.
Um,
Those
how
are the
did
days
those? Yeah, I
you
wouldn't trade
just
them.
again, we've said it so many times. Hear the books, and go to it.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you this: when I got here, um, Mrs. Watson and Mr. Gonzalez told me, "Oh yeah, well these are the books, but you can use any book you like.
perfect.
You use this and I use the other." And I said, "Wait a minute, we're talking about the same class. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. We just do whatever you want. I said,
Whatever.
okay, all right. So
Yeah, and given your position now, you look back on that, oh my.
yes,
So,
oh my.
yeah,
Yes.
how did you get into the administration, Pete? How did that all go down?
Well, it's one of those things again. I tend to reflect back on things. That's my nature. I just do those things. And I was teaching Spanish, and I had some ideas of things that I wanted to do. You get to a point where you see where things could be better, and you want to make a difference. And so initially, I thought, well, when Kathy steps down, I would like to be, department leader. So I put in for that, and eventually I got the position and so forth because I had some ideas in terms of what I wanted to do with the department, and so that's where it started. And then Brother Patrick came in, and uh, Brother Patrick, after a few years, I wasn't department leader then. I put it in, and I think it was around the same time that you might relate to that. It was the year when Brother Patrick was coming in that there was like a cleaning out, I guess, of the department leaders. You
Yeah,
remember that? I guess. Yeah.
starting over. Yeah,
It was
starting
it
over.
was something. Yeah, it was kind of drastic, but it happened, and that's the
Yeah.
way it was. And I had put in my name. For some reason, the only two people who survived were Irene Colmo and Kathy Canella. So I didn't get the position then. But I spoke with Patrick, and so forth, and it was a hard time for me, I have to say. After being a number of years here at Columbus, it was difficult. I had also had a few other incidents that but nothing that we need to get into right now. And I had a talk with Patrick, and I said my situation and so forth, and he said, well, let's see what happens. So eventually, I became department leader. I was department leader for a few years, and then at some point he said, you know what, I would like for you to help us with the accreditation, to lead the accreditation, and to find someone to work with. And so he said, who do you want to work with? I said, and I knew Terry Showman, and she's a Spitfire. I mean, she's just great, and I knew of her already. I said, Terry would be a good person to work with.
Okay.
Because I agree with you. He has a high respect for Terry as well. And so we both embarked on this journey. And I've been doing this for the longest time, as much as probably as I've been in administration for the most part. But anyways, so he said, fine. So you have this, and so we started. That was the first time that I did it, and thereafter, there was this brother Ken. I forget his last name, but he was assistant principal, and then he left. There was some situation.
Ken Ward.
Ken Ward, correct.
Yeah.
And so that's when Patrick said, "Listen, Pedro, do you want to join the administration?" So it was March. I think it was March of 2008. We had just finished the accreditation process and everything, which went very well and so forth. And he said, "Would you like to be part of the administration?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to." I mean, and again, it's one of those things where it's not that I was looking for the job. Is that I saw an opportunity where you want to you're a certain level and you see certain things and you want to be able to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I had been involved in the accreditation process, which gives you an inside look into the workings of the school, because you have to just deal with you know the details of programs and how things happen, and you have a lot of conversation with people, and you're creating all these documents to give a sense of the place for the visiting team. So it gives you a very good view of the school. And so I had seen a whole bunch of things that I thought well, they're worthwhile doing. And so Pat gave me that opportunity, and I thought we were in an extremely great place. And then he's gone. He's called up to do something else. And I remember I had that conversation that spring. We're walking down the hallway between the A and the C, and I'm saying, "But Pat, you can't leave.
Yeah.
We're just starting something here, Pat. How can you leave right now?"
A lot of people said that. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, "My God." I said, "Don't worry. You'll be all right. I trust you all will make it, and you're gonna do great things and so forth." And and so that's how it started. And then Michael was the principal, and I worked with Michael. Did also a tremendous job. Mike did transitioning from Pat, which wasn't easy because
No, you don't.
Pat really,
That's a tough act to follow. Yeah,
yeah, he rocked this place.
he did.
You know, I always tell Pat, you were to Columbus was what the Vatican II was for the church. You said open doors and windows. There's another world out there,
Yeah.
and as good as things are here, then we learned about Marist in Rome and up in New York, and the students started going different places, and the place opened up. And we haven't been the same since. I have to be honest with you. So that was a pivotal point for us in terms of where we're going now. So that's the story, and that's how I ended up here, and I've continued to do this. The position was initially I sort of like an associate academic dean. The name, the title, the position didn't exist.
Yeah.
And you know what? I just didn't see myself doing that. I said, you know what? I said, I think I'm going to call myself Dean of Curriculum and Professional Development. The thing didn't exist. I just created it because I said, these are the two areas that I really want to work with.
Sure.
Pat honestly Pat Call she's a great mentor. I love working with Pat. Her knowledge was tremendous. Well, she had been here so many years, and she had this place. She knew exactly, everything about the inner workings of the place. So I enjoy very much working with her. But I realized that the two areas where I perhaps we could be improving were precisely curriculum. And so I started doing a few things along those lines and professional development. And you talk about Lavala. Well, Lavala initiated during that time, actually it was before, it was during Angelo's time. There was a teacher, and I forget his name, but he taught next to me in C13. And, he wasn't effective with the classroom management. So kids, being kids, they took advantage of the situation, and he would close himself up in the room in the afternoons, and he would come around and knock and whatever. I had to go out sometimes to just wear them off. But they taunted him. And I thought to myself, it's sad what you were saying before. Here are your books, and you go off and do your thing.
Yeah.
And we can't have this. I mean, how can you let someone, just give him the rope and hangs himself? In that regard, we need to have something to support. So I brought it up with Mike, who was I think director of admissions then.
Yeah.
We got to put something together. And I remember that initially I talked with John Cunningham, Mary McCullough. We both started, we all three, and Paul Edwards started the same year.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so we started this going. The Lavala project, we called it, because it was a project. It was meant to be something that could be, free flowing, depends on our needs, but it had to have a basis, in terms of who we are as a Marist school. And fortunately, in the footsteps of Master Champagne, that manual came out, had just come out a few years before. And so we used that as the basis, but we were talking about, relationships and what we do in the classrooms. That was to support the new teachers. And so we initiated that, and that was very good. And eventually, like you said, Terry has done a tremendous job of bringing it to the next level. And Maria Acevedo has continued and continues to do great things, like anything we do around here, like when we started with the Moss program.
Yeah.
Delilah did a great thing in putting it together at the beginning, and you see the Moss program now, and it's just like, my God, it's the envy. Other schools have copied what we've been able to do.
Oh, absolutely.
So
And
these are great
we
things.
have no game plan for some of this stuff, and it
No,
just evolves organically. And yes, again, standing on the shoulders of giants. Lavala went from you to Terry to now Maria. Moss went from Delilah to Carter to now, Sylvie.
yeah,
And man, we just keep going and going and going. And so, Pete, why don't we do this? Because there's so many other things I want to talk to you about. For example, people often think, well, there's the discipline office over here and the academic office over here, and never shall the two meet. And that's absolutely not true. Different night and day, but dependent upon each other. Absolutely. And there's a lot of other things I want to get into. So why don't, now that we've got you up to where you're at and have been, why don't we just plan on a part two? Because in part two, I also want to get into, okay, leave Columbus aside, and this image of you, it's not just an image, it's who you are at work. But I think it's accurate to say you don't confuse what you do for who you are.
right,
And who
right.
you are is not necessarily who the kids see in your office. I really want to get into that. And so why don't we call this part one, and
Okay.
then we'll get into the other stuff in part two. And I think people will find it, there's a lot that goes on that people they're not privy to, they don't understand. And I think if we do anything, Pete, that hurts us sometimes, we make it look too easy at Columbus. And
Yeah.
it's not. 1,700 boys, the curriculum we have, the
No,
program we have, it ain't easy, man.
no,
And that's a credit to the administration and our teachers. So
I agree.
why don't we save that? We'll call this part one, and I look forward to part two. What do you think?
I look forward to it, John. Yes, I mean, we could be talking for days.
Oh, absolutely. And that's when things are going well, because
Yeah.
I'm not tap dancing trying to come up with something to say. The best is yet to come in this one, and this has been great thus far. So if you're game, I'm game, Pete.
All right, good. I'm good. I would love it, John. I would love it. Yes.
Yeah, because
Here
there's
I
some.
am. Just a recap on what you were just saying before. I find that I work at Dr. Vila's office. That's how they call this place, Dr. Vila's office. And, what am I, shop liver? I don't know, but
Oh, I know. The shadow that Mr. McKeon cast over in the other office. Come on now.
that's right. Mr. McKeon's office.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll find him there in Mr. McKeon's office.
Go to McKeon's office. Yeah. But anyway,
Somewhere. That's okay, John. Look forward to it, John. I look forward to it.
let's continue this. Explore Nation, I hope you've enjoyed part one. I look forward to part two. So, Pete, thank you for the time. You are a busy man, and despite your calm demeanor, there's always something going on in there.
Indeed,
And
John.
so we'll circle back. And until next time, Explore Nation, thank you for joining us. And as always, take it easy. Buenos tiempos and adelante, man. Thank you, Pete.
All right, John.